It is a football Friday. Getting too old to do that. It is a football Friday, January the 20th, 2023. 4 games in the NFL playoff divisional round. We'll talk about all of them. The latest with Kevin Stefanski hiring Jim Schwartz as the defensive coordinator. The Cavs' tough loss in Memphis a couple of nights ago. And looking ahead to their big game with the Golden State Warriors. We'll talk about it all and a whole lot more on this Friday Bullpen with Adam the Bull.
Podcast is not for the faint of heart.
And I do think it's time for the Browns to move on.
It's not for those who ride the fence.
He's proven nothing.
But if you're looking for someone who tells it like it is about Cleveland sports,
everybody does fandom their way.
You've come to the right place.
I don't think he's any good.
It's time for the Bullpen with Adam the Bull.
Right, we are back, and on this football Friday, the Browns are hoping, and Browns fans, you're all hoping that the Browns can be one of the teams playing in the divisional round of the playoffs. It hasn't happened often, and hopefully it'll happen next year. You have the quarterback, hopefully, to do it. Do you have the coach? Well, that's still a question mark. The Browns have a new defensive coordinator in Jim Schwartz. This morning, Jim Schwartz was on my old radio station, 92.3 The Fan. Unlike my old radio station, I can mention my old radio station as opposed to them being not allowed to mention our TV show, which is quite petty. Not the host's fault. But anyway, Kevin Stefanski was on with Lima and Ken this morning, and the guys did a nice job. You actually got some real tidbits out of Kevin Stefanski, which is stunning because you usually get nothing out of Kevin Stefanski. So kudos to those guys for actually getting him to say some things. I mean, it wasn't a ton, but usually get nothing. So a little bit is certainly an upgrade on nothing from Kevin Stefanski. I thought he had a really interesting answer when he was asked about the play calling. He admitted something that I just heard from somebody else yesterday. He admitted this morning that play calling is not fun. And he understands that a lot of people scream, call the play, shouldn't call the play, shouldn't call the plays. And he talked about why he does it. And I think what he had to say makes sense. He talked about other teams around the league, some head coaches that call plays, some that don't, that he's always checking it out. He talked about like this not being an ego thing. I 100% believe that. Not that I always believe things that coaches say. And certainly there's plenty of times where Kevin Stefanski's not giving you the full story. That's pretty obvious. But in this case, I don't think he's calling plays out of ego. I think he's calling plays because he thinks it's what's best for the team. Now, you could argue that's at least subconscious ego. I think to some degree, right? But I don't think he has this attitude, well, nobody else could do this. I just think for this team right now, that's what he thinks. We can argue about it till we're blue in the face. At least right now, I mean, if Alex Van Pelt were going to become the play caller, it would have happened by now. Like, not all of a sudden in year 4 is he going to hand over the reins to him. What he did instead was bring in a head coach to coach his defense, essentially. And Jim Schwartz is going to run the defense, and Kevin Stefanski, who knew he had to make a change, talked about it being a hard part of the business, but a necessary part of the business. Kevin Stefanski is going to obviously have more faith in Jim Schwartz to run the defense than he did with the previous regime, with Joe Woods. So, I mean, I think if you're expecting Kevin Stefanski to back off from his involvement in the offense, that's not happening. In fact, the hiring of Jim Schwartz may have the opposite effect. He may already spends the majority of his time with the offense. It may go up even more. Ultimately, the number one goal for the Browns is to win games by whatever means necessary. But he now has a defensive coach that he is going to trust completely. to run his side of the ball. And Jim Schwartz will they'll talk about a team effort and collaboration, and that there's truth in that, I believe. But Jim Schwartz is going to pick his staff. I think the entire defensive staff will be blown out of here. I'd be very surprised if anybody remains off this defensive staff. And I believe Jim Schwartz will be given carte blanche to hire whoever he wants on the defensive side as his position coaches. And Jim Schwartz has been in the league for 30 years, has been part of 5 or 6 organizations at this point. And so he has connections all over the place. And because the Browns made the move pretty quickly, while you're still seeing now, yesterday, so the Vikings fire their DC, teams are still firing coordinators. So the Browns have a chance now to build their staff a little before some of these other teams that are looking to build staffs. So that's an advantage there. So you've got a 30-year experienced coach, guy who's been at the upper levels of coaching for 2 decades. He's been in many organizations, and he has a head start of the other teams that are trying to build up. So I think that's a good advantage there, and I think Jim Schwartz will have a ton of say. I also believe that Jim Schwartz will have some say, at least, when the Browns are making selections in the draft on the defensive side. I don't think there's any... you'd be foolish not to, if you're Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski and Paul DePodesta, whoever is involved in the draft process, to not want to, at the very least, get some thoughts on a guy you're considering drafting from a 30-year veteran defensive coach. It would be absurd. Now you could say, well, the Browns are a clown organization. There's that. I've said all those things too. I'm going to choose to believe in this case that with smart guys running the team now, sans the owner, that they will choose to use his expertise. Now, I don't know that Jim Schwartz has been studying game film on college players like the scouts and Andrew Berry and that stuff, so there's advantages they have. But in the end, if you're meeting with a player, if you're watching him at the combine, if you're doing late film study and you're down to maybe 2 guys that you're considering, obviously you want Jim Schwartz involved there. Not to mention his connection so many years in the league. He's probably got plenty of connections in the college game too, in terms of, hey, tell me about this kid, coach, whoever. So that's something you want to take advantage of if you're Kevin Stefanski. It does appear that Mike Prefer has kept his job as Browns special teams coach. I don't think that was set in stone heading into this offseason. I thought there was a chance he'd keep his job, and it looks like he has. I would think at this point, I'd be very surprised if Mike Prefer is not back. The Browns were so decisive at D.C. It's pretty clear they weren't 100% certain, and that maybe some things need to be said or whatever. There was some discussion. I don't think Mike Prefer was guaranteed the job this year. But he wasn't a short thing out the door like Joe Woods, who was a short thing out the door. So Mike Prefer's back. He's obviously going to be on the hot seat this year, but so is Kevin Stefanski. But I do think if special teams don't significantly improve, that he'll be out the door after this season, even if the rest of the staff turns the team around and the Browns are good next year. And to make that happen, ultimately, I'm okay with Kevin Stefanski being focused on the offense because you have a man that I know I completely trust to run the defense. And I think most people will as well. This season, the biggest thing this offseason is unlocking Deshaun Watson and getting him back to being the player he was in Houston. In Houston, Deshaun Watson was a tier 1 quarterback. That's my new thing now. I'm not saying top 10 because it's not really 10. The dividing line after tier 1 is before 10. I'm not saying top 5 because it may be just past 5. It probably is. It varies every year. There are tiers of quarterbacks. If you have a tier 1 quarterback, you got a chance every year. You got a tier 2 quarterback, you're in good shape. Team's got to be a little better. The lower tier you go, the better the team has to be around them to win. If you have a tier 3 quarterback, things got to be perfect. Below that, you got no shot. Not in this NFL. So there you go. For example, my thought is Kirk Cousins is a, top tier 3 quarterback. Now, Deshaun Watson didn't even play. I mean, he was terrible this year. He wasn't even in the, any tiers. I mean, he was tier 10. There really isn't a tier 10, but you see the point. Deshaun Watson in Houston was a tier 1 quarterback his entire time there. Now, I would say, earlier he was maybe on the lower end, but it doesn't matter. And the Browns and Kevin Stefanski and Alex Van Pelt, in addition to adding talent to this roster, need to turn Deshaun Watson, figure out how to get him back. Now, maybe it's not possible. Maybe because of the time off. Maybe he's mentally scarred from everything that he's put himself through or been put through, depending on what the real truth is. We'll never know for sure. At the very least, he put himself through some of this. Possibly not all, but some. Maybe he can't get over the mental hurdles of that. Maybe he's lost that edge. Maybe he's lost that confidence, the cockiness, whatever it may be. And if he can't ever get that back, then he'll never be that player again. And that is the concern. And that's something, honestly, I didn't even consider when the Browns traded for him. Never thought that would be possible. And it is possible. But if the Browns can get over that, the mental hurdle, and get him back to the player he was in Houston, then the Browns will be perennial contenders for the next bunch of years. I don't think there's any doubt about it. It won't be easy. That's not a guarantee of anything when you're in a conference that's got Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, not to mention Trevor Lawrence and Lamar Jackson and Tua, who I'm not a big fan of, but he played very well last year. So again, it's not a guarantee of anything. But if Deshaun Watson plays like a tier 1 quarterback with the talent the Browns have, and hopefully will upgrade, the Browns should be in the mix. All right, we'll leave the Browns for now. When we come back, let's talk some playoffs. 4 big games this weekend. Who's going to win them? Who's going to lose them? Will they be close? We'll get to it all next. First, Bet Online. Speaking of games, your number 1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. Football, basketball, whatever sport you're looking for, they've got you covered. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at Bet Online as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts. All right. A little water here. Okay. So, let's talk NFL playoffs. This weekend, full slate of games, obviously. Let's start on Saturday. First game of the day of this round. The Jacksonville Jaguars and the Kansas City Chiefs. The game's in Kansas City. The Chiefs are a 9-point favorite. It is expected to be around 40 degrees with some precipitation in Kansas City for this game. Obviously, the Jaguars are a warm weather team playing it is northern Florida, but still Florida. A game that was pretty cool weather last week. Jacksonville with a wild game, as we all know. Horrible in the first half. Trevor Lawrence, 4 picks in the first half, 4 touchdowns in the second. Obviously, you're not expecting that type of game again. Kansas City, meanwhile, 2 weeks off. Get a huge advantage that the Bills and Bengals game didn't play a couple weeks ago. And so they lock in the number 1 seed. And now they get to play Jacksonville, which is likely the worst team remaining in the playoffs, either them or the Giants. A lot of people are predicting a blowout in this game. I'm not one of them. I do think Kansas City will win, but I think Jacksonville will keep this game close. I think the spread's too high. And I know the consensus is, Jacksonville, we'll see the team in the first half. What they did in the second half was a miracle. The Chargers are soft. The Chiefs won't let that happen. Well, all I know is the Jaguars' offense since the middle of the season has been really, really good. And the Chiefs don't have a great defense. So that leads me to believe that the Jaguars, even on the road, in hostile conditions, without much playoff experience, and Kansas City having a ton of it, The way Trevor Lawrence is playing, sans the first half last week, I think he keeps them in the game. I've got the Chiefs winning a fairly high-scoring game here. I'm going to go with some kind of weird score like 36-31 or something like that. I think the Chiefs will win, but the Jaguars cover, so I'll take the Jaguars +9 in Kansas City. Game number 2. The Giants and the Eagles. The game is on Fox, the Jags-Chief game on NBC. Giants-Eagles on Fox, 8:15 start at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia. Game time temperature 44 degrees. I mean, for a 8:15 p.m. start in January, that's pretty good for Philadelphia. 44 and no precipitation. The Eagles are a 7.5-point favorite in this game. Now, when the playoffs started, I did not pick the Eagles to get to the Super Bowl, even though I thought they were the best team because I was worried about Jalen Hurts. And I still remain, even though he's off the injury report and he seems to be completely recovered now from his injury. He's only played one game in the last month. He didn't look good in that game. He still looked hurt. It's 2 weeks later. Is he completely over it? I don't know. And because of that, I'm going to take the Giants, again, like with the Jaguars, to cover but not win. I do think Philly wins, but I think the Giants will keep it close. The Giants obviously played very well against Minnesota. Now Philadelphia's got a much better defense than Minnesota. But like I said, a lot of this is my concern that Jalen Hurts is not healthy. If you told me that Jalen Hurts was going to look like the quarterback we saw until he got hurt, I'd probably lean towards Philadelphia. But even still, 7.5 is a lot for a division rivalry. And the Giants aren't a great team, but they're solid. They play good defense. They're well coached. And they're coming off a confidence-building win when they already won on the road. So it wouldn't stun me if the Giants won the game outright, especially if Jalen Hurts. If Jalen Hurts is not right, it would not stun me if the Giants won this game outright. But I'll say the Eagles win it, but the Giants do cover. I've got the final score of this one being 23-20. Eagles on top of the Giants plus 7.5. We go from Saturday to Sunday. Obviously, as many of you know, the game I'll be most locked into will be 3 p.m. on Sunday at Highmark Stadium in Orchard Park, New York. 33 degrees, cloudy skies, potentially some light snow in the forecast, as the Bengals and Bills will play on CBS. Obviously, the teams were scheduled to play a few weeks ago in Cincinnati on Monday Night Football. And we all know what happened with Damar Hamlin. The Bengals had a 7-3 lead at the time, but the game got suspended and then never replayed. I maintain that this game should be a neutral site game. The NFL determined that the Bills and Chiefs game should be neutral site because if the Bills had beaten the Bengals, then the Bills would have been the number 1 seed and the Chiefs would have been the number 2. So they decided to make that game neutral field. If the opposite had happened and the Bengals had beaten the Bills in a game in Cincinnati on Monday Night Football that the Bengals led, again, way early, but they led. If the Bengals had won that game, they would have been the number 2 seed over the Bills, and this game would have been played in Cincinnati. To me, I look at it the same way, and this should have been a neutral site game. Now, some would argue, and I'm sure the league is, that, well, the Bengals and Bills played the same amount of games, so there's no disadvantage. But ultimately, the rules say winning percentage. And so the Chiefs against the Bills, based on the rules of the league, should have been in Kansas City. The league changed it because they thought it was unfair. I don't see how it's not unfair in this case anyway. However, in the end, it is what it is. Can't cry about it. One of the big things in this game, 2 big things that we talked about on the show yesterday. One, the Bengals' offensive line, which was terrible last year. They redid it this season after some struggles early. They were playing very well in the second half of the season. In week 15 of the regular season, Lyle Collins, the Bengals' right tackle, tore up his knee, out for the season. In week 16, right guard Alex Kappa got hurt. He has not played since. And that was week 16 with Lyle Collins, or the second to last game. And then Kappa got hurt in the final regular season game. And then in the playoff game last week, left tackle Jonah Williams got hurt. Now, Williams and Kappa may come back at some point, but probably, I don't know if they'll come back at all. But it doesn't. I thought yesterday there was a chance that Jonah Williams would play for the Bengals. Looks like that's not going to be the case. So the Bengals will be starting 3 backup offensive linemen. Obviously, that's a challenge and kind of puts their offensive line back to where it was last year. And last year they made it to the Super Bowl. Now, does that mean that's going to happen this year? Certainly not. In this week last year, the Bengals went on the road and beat the number 1 seed Titans to get to the AFC Championship game in Kansas City. They will try to do the same thing this year, except the game's in Buffalo. It's a much tougher game. I think I'm going to be a little biased on this pick. I was convinced that the Bengals were going to the Super Bowl. Now, I admit the struggles, the injuries to the offensive line have knocked down my confidence some, especially the latest one to the left tackle. Even though the Bengals right guard Alex Kappa is better than the left tackle Jonah Williams, I thought the left tackle was the bigger loss because that puts honestly, the Bengals have drafted very well the last few years, but one of the few really bad picks was Jackson Carman, who they drafted in the second round. Now, Jackson Carman was a left tackle in college. This is his first chance to really play that position, so maybe he'll be better, but I don't have a lot of hope there. In the end, though, Joe Burrow finds a way no matter the pressure, and you look at the other side of this, and Josh Allen has made a lot of big mistakes in big moments in the red zone. He did it last week. I mean, they kept handing the ball to the Dolphins, who had no quarterback. You do that with the Bengals, they'll make you pay. I'm be stunned if the Bengals don't cover, and I'll take them to outright win. Last 20 games that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase have played together, the Bengals have either won or lost by 3 or less, and they're a 5.5-point underdog in this one. So I'm taking the Bengals plus 5.5, and I've got them winning this game 28-27. 1-point win for the Bengals on the road. Final game, Cowboys and 49ers. Ratings will be huge for this one. Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, California. Game's at 6:30 on Fox. It's the nicest weather of the 4 games. It's expected to be 56 degrees and cloudy. It'll actually be 3:30 local time. It's 6:30 for us. Dak Prescott played maybe his most impressive game he's ever played in defeating Tom Brady and the Buccaneers last week. The most concerning thing about that game for the Cowboys was their kicker, Brett Maher, who missed 4 straight extra points. The guy's been excellent all season, and it didn't hurt him in that game, but it very well may in this game. I am a little concerned about that as I pick a Cowboy upset in this game. The Cowboys are a 4-point underdog on the road. I think the Brock Purdy sensational season comes to a halt. I think the Cowboys defense gets to him. I think the Cowboys hopefully play smart and use Tony Pollard a lot more than Zeke Elliott. Want to use Zeke at the goal line to punch it in? Fine. But Pollard's by far the more explosive back. Can Dak play 2 big games in a row? I think he will. And the much maligned Cowboys by a lot of people, including me, I believed in them when the playoffs started. I really had no reason to, but I did. I had a hunch on them, and I'm sticking with it. I'll take the Cowboys to upset the 49ers 27-24 in San Francisco. So again, my picks this week, I'm taking all 4 underdogs. The Jags plus 9, the Giants plus 7.5, the Bengals plus 5.5, and the Cowboys plus 4. I am predicting 2 upsets, the Cowboys and Bengals to win. The Giants and Jags I have covering but not winning. All right, quick break and wrap it up with some Cavaliers. That's coming up next in the bullpen with Adam the Bull. I'm going to talk more about this on the show today, but I went down a We Are the World rabbit hole last night. I can't get the song out of my head now. More on that later. To the NBA. Cleveland Cavaliers. It was a really weird game a Wednesday night when they lose to Memphis 115-114. In a way, you want to call it a great or a what's the word I'm looking for? Not a great loss, but I don't know. The word's not coming to me, but it was an impressive loss. I don't know. because Memphis is, as good as any team in the NBA. They were 19-3 at home. They were 100% healthy. The Cavs without their best player, Donovan Mitchell. They were down 19 points. They gave up 68 points in the first half, held Memphis to 47 in the second half, had a 3-point lead in less than a minute to go. Got a bad call on Jared Allen, unfortunately, for a foul that led to a couple of free throws before the Adams putback and the game-winning, and the Cavs missed, really can't even get off a game-winning shot there at the end with Darius Garland. So it's a disappointing loss, but overall there was a lot of positives out of this game, especially at the play of Evan Mobley, who had 18 points, 15 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 block shots, and a steal. Mobley was aggressive on both ends of the floor, and I thought in the fourth quarter that's as good as I've ever seen him look. He looked great on the defensive end, on the glass, shooting the ball, took the foul line jumper, was confident. Also, Isaac Okoro played really well, was a perfect 6 of 6 from the field, 4 of 4 from 3, had 17 points. I don't know what Karis LeVert was doing in the fourth quarter, honestly. JB deserves some criticism for not calling the timeout before that 5-second call, not setting up a play at the end. I don't know why you go home with a timeout there. The Cavs continue to struggle on the road, now 9-14 on the road on the season. The Cavs, as they begin action today, sit in 5th place in the Eastern Conference by percentage points. The Brooklyn Nets have dropped 4 in a row. Cavs are now 6 games out of first. The Celtics are just on fire right now. They've won 8 in a row after they had hit a little slump. The Celtics have pulled away from the rest of the Eastern Conference. They have a 4.5-game lead over Milwaukee and Philly for the top seed in the East. So the Celtics appear to be pulling away. Now, we still got a long way to go. There's still 35 games, or 34, 36, whatever, depending on the team, 30-something games left. So it's not over. But if the Celtics stay healthy, it looks like they're in great shape to be the number 1 seed. The Bucks and the Sixers are both an identical 29-16. The Nets and Cavs are both a game and a half back of Milwaukee and Philly. Nets technically ahead, better winning percentage. Nets have played 2 less games, so they're 1 up, and the Cavs have 1 more loss. Then there's a drop 3 games to Miami and the Knicks, who are both 25-21 in the 6 and 7 spots. You obviously want to avoid being out of the top 6. If you're the Cavs, you really need to get into the top 4 and hopefully can get into the top, 1's not I don't think is realistic at this point, but can you get to 2 or 3? Yeah, I mean, there are only 2 back in the loss column, both Milwaukee and Philadelphia, so that's possible. Cavs with a fun game tonight. They'll play the Warriors at home. Cavs coming back home, and they obviously played in Golden State back in November, and they lost that game 106-101. Haven't seen the updated status of Donovan Mitchell yet. But this is an exciting weekend if you're a Cavs fan. They've got back-to-back home games tonight against the Warriors and tomorrow against the Bucks. That is quite the challenge before they head on a 3-game, 4-day road trip with the Knicks, the Rockets, and the Thunder. So, going to be a fun weekend. Watch the Cavs again tonight and tomorrow, both at 7:30. Warriors, Bucks, two really fun teams to watch. I know the obviously the Warriors haven't been as good this season. Milwaukee's been the better team, but the Warriors, they're always a challenge. Interestingly, in the West, the 7 through 10 seeds are all have the exact same record. Well, the exact same winning percentage. T-Wolves and Clippers 23-24, Warriors and Thunder 22-23. All 10 games out. So, anyway, that's the story with the Cavs. All right, that's it for me. I'll talk to you on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, and I'll be back on Monday here on the podcast. Where else but right here in the bullpen with Adam the Bull. See ya.